The rope snapped. Elena's scream echoed against the stone walls as she plummeted into darkness, her fingernails scraping against the rough-hewn stones of the well. 20 feet down, she crashed into the sandy bottom with a sickening thud, her left shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. Above her, a circle of pale afternoon sky seemed impossibly distant, framed by the weathered wooden rim that might as well have been the edge of the world. "Please," she called upward, her voice breaking. "I didn't steal anything. Maria, tell them the truth." But there was only silence. The 8-year-old daughter of Don Alejandro Vasquez had already run back to the hacienda, her lie echoing in the desert air like a death sentence. The missing silver locket, a family heirloom worth more than Elena could earn in 5 years of washing clothes and tending gardens, had been found in her quarters. Maria's tearful accusation had sealed her fate. Elena pressed her back against the cool stone wall, feeling the rough texture through her torn cotton dress. The desert heat was already beginning to seep down into her prison, though the sun wouldn't reach the bottom for hours yet. She thought of her mother, buried 3 months ago in the small cemetery behind the mission. She thought of her younger brother Miguel, working the copper mines near Tucson, believing his sister was safe under the protection of one of the territory's wealthiest families. She had been so wrong. As the afternoon stretched on, Elena's throat began to burn with thirst. The walls of the well were dry as bone. This had been a failed dig, abandoned when the water table proved too deep to reach. Now it served as her tomb. She closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself thinking about the man she'd glimpsed that morning at the edge of the property, tall and lean, with skin weathered by sun and wind, watching the hacienda from atop a painted horse. There had been something about his stillness that had caught her attention, the way he sat so perfectly motionless that he seemed carved from the landscape itself. Now, as the sky above began to shift from blue to amber, she wished she had spoken to him, wished she had asked for help, for water, for anything. But servants didn't speak to strangers, especially not when Don Alejandro's men carried rifles and had reputations for shoot-first questions. The sound of falling pebbles made her look up. A shadow moved across the mouth of the well. "Hello?" Her voice was already growing hoarse. Silence. Then, impossibly, a length of thick desert vine began to descend into the well. Not rope, vine, still green and flexible, braided together with careful precision. Elena stared at it, hardly daring to breathe. This wasn't one of Don Alejandro's men. They would have used rope, would have called down first, would have demanded explanations. "Grab hold," a voice called from above. It was deep, quiet, accented with something she couldn't place. Not Mexican Spanish, not the harsh English of the territorial officials, something older. Elena's hands shook as she reached for the vine. Her injured shoulder screamed in protest, but she forced herself to grip tightly. The vine held her weight as she was slowly, carefully pulled upward. Hand over hand, she climbed toward the circle of sky that grew larger with each moment. When her head finally cleared the rim of the well, strong hands grasped her arms and lifted her onto solid ground. She found herself staring into the darkest eyes she had ever seen, black as obsidian, set in a face that could have been carved from canyon stone. His skin was the color of burnished copper, and along the left side of his neck, a tattoo spiraled in intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the fading light. It was beautiful and fierce, depicting what looked like a thunderbird in flight, its wings spread wide. He was the man from the morning, but up close she could see the careful intelligence in his gaze, the quiet strength in the way he held himself. He wore simple clothes, leather pants, a cotton shirt, boots that had seen hard miles, but there was something about him that spoke of dignity, of a different kind of nobility than Don Alejandro's inherited wealth. "You're hurt," he said, his voice still quiet but carrying easily in the desert air. Elena tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. Her throat felt lined with sand. Without a word, he lifted a water skin to her lips. The water was warm but clean, tasting faintly of sage. She drank greedily, feeling life flow back into her parched throat. "Easy," he murmured, pulling the water skin away when she'd had enough. "Too much at once will make you sick." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still rough but functional. "Thank you. I thought I was going to." She couldn't finish the sentence. He studied her face in the growing dusk. In the distance she could see the lights of the hacienda beginning to flicker on. Soon they would discover her quarters empty, would realize she had somehow escaped. Don Alejandro's men would come looking. "You can't go back there," the stranger said, as if reading her thoughts. Elena nodded, tears threatening. "I have nowhere else to go. My family, my brother thinks I'm safe here, and I didn't steal that locket. I swear to you I didn't." "I know," he said simply. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. "How do you know?" He reached into his shirt and withdrew something that caught the last light of the sun, the silver locket, its delicate chain draped across his palm like captured starlight. Elena gasped. "How did you?" The child dropped it by the creek this morning. I saw her throw it in your room through the window. I retrieved it after she left. Elena felt her knees go weak. All of this, the accusation, the well nearly dying because a spoiled child had lost her grandmother's locket and been too frightened to admit it. Why didn't you return it to her? Elena asked. The man's expression darkened. Because I've seen how Don Alejandro treats his servants. I knew what would happen when it was found. He tucked the locket back into his shirt. This will clear your name, but not until you're safely away from here. In the distance, Elena could hear the sound of horses, voices calling her name. They were coming. The stranger's hand touched her elbow gently. Trust me. Elena looked into those obsidian eyes and saw something there that made her chest tighten. Not just kindness, but a deep understanding of what it meant to be cast out, to be blamed for things beyond your control. She nodded. He led her to where his horse waited, a beautiful paint mare with intelligent eyes and a gentle disposition. He helped Elena up first, then swung up behind her with fluid grace. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and she caught his scent, leather and sage, and something uniquely him that made her feel safer than she had in months. They rode into the desert as the first stars appeared, the horses' hooves silent on the sand. Behind them, the voices of the search party grew fainter, until they were swallowed entirely by the vast silence of the wilderness. What's your name? Elena asked quietly. Daniel, he replied. Daniel Crowfeather. The name fit him perfectly, both the English and the native heritage evident in his features, the way he moved with the landscape rather than against it. I'm Elena Morales. I know, he said, and she could hear the small smile in his voice. I've been watching the hacienda for 3 days. Watching for what? For you. The simple statement sent warmth spiraling through her chest. I don't understand. Daniel was quiet for a moment, guiding the horse around a cluster of beryl cacti. My grandmother had visions sometimes, he said finally, dreams that came true. 3 weeks ago she told me I would find a woman in great danger, a woman whose heart was as strong as desert stone but whose spirit was nearly broken. She said this woman would become precious to me, and I to her. Elena felt her breath catch. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. She died 5 years ago. They rode in comfortable silence after that, the horse carrying them deeper into the desert. The moon rose full and bright, turning the landscape into a silver dreamscape of shadows and light. Elena had never been this far from the settlements, had never experienced the desert's night beauty, the way the cacti became sculptural silhouettes, how the distant mountains looked like sleeping giants. After what felt like hours, Daniel guided the horse toward a formation of red rock that rose from the desert floor like ancient towers. As they drew closer, Elena could see that the rocks were riddled with caves and overhangs, carved by centuries of wind and water. This is home, Daniel said, dismounting and helping her down. The cave he led her to was larger than she had expected, with a ceiling high enough for them to stand upright, and a natural chimney that drew smoke upward. Someone, Daniel, she realized, had made this place comfortable. There were woven blankets on the floor, shelves carved into the rock walls holding supplies, even a small wooden table and chairs that looked handmade. It's beautiful, Elena said, meaning it. Daniel lit an oil lamp, filling the cave with warm, dancing light. It was a sacred place for my grandmother's people, the Tohono O'odham. Now it's just peaceful. As he busied himself preparing a simple meal from his supplies, Elena studied the cave walls. In the lamplight she could see faint pictographs, ancient paintings of animals and human figures, spirals and geometric patterns that seemed to tell stories she couldn't read but somehow understood. Daniel, she said softly, why did you help me, really? He paused in his work, his back still turned to her. Because I know what it's like to be caught between worlds, he said quietly. My father was a cavalry officer. My mother was Tohono O'odham. Neither people fully accepted me, and I've spent my life trying to find where I belong. Elena felt her heart ache for him. And have you found it? Where you belong? Daniel turned to face her, and in the lamplight his expression was unbearably tender. I think I'm beginning to. That night, Elena slept on one side of the cave while Daniel took the other, both of them wrapped in hand-woven blankets that smelled of sage and cedar, but sleep was elusive. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the walls of the well closing in around her, felt the terror of being abandoned to die alone in the dark. She must have made a sound, because suddenly Daniel was there, kneeling beside her makeshift bed. Bad dreams? He asked gently. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. May I? He gestured to the space beside her. She nodded again, and he settled next to her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. Tell me about your family, he said quietly. So Elena told him about her mother, who had taught her to read using an old Bible, and had insisted that education was the key to freedom. She told him about Miguel, working dangerous shifts in the mines to send money back to her, believing she was safe and well cared for at the hacienda. She told him about her dreams of opening a school someday, of teaching children who had never held a book. In return, Daniel told her about his grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died of influenza, about learning to track animals and read the weather, about the stories she had told him of the old ways, when the desert bloomed with different kinds of life. About his years as a scout for the Territorial Army, trying to bridge the gap between two cultures that seemed determined to destroy each other. As dawn approached, they found themselves lying face to face, their voices growing softer and softer until they were whispering like conspirators sharing precious secrets. "What will happen now?" Elena asked. Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and traced a gentle finger along her cheek. "That depends on what you want to happen." Elena felt her pulse quicken. In the growing light she could see every detail of his face, the laugh lines around his eyes, the small scar on his chin, the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheekbones. He was beautiful in a way that made her chest tight, but more than that, he made her feel seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in her life. She began, then stopped, suddenly shy. "Tell me," he encouraged. "I want to stay here with you," she whispered. "I want to learn about this place, about your grandmother's stories. I want to help you bridge those worlds you talked about. She took a shaky breath. "I want to fall in love with you, if I haven't already started." Daniel's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Elena Morales," he said softly, "I think my grandmother's vision was incomplete." "What do you mean?" "She said you would become precious to me. She didn't mention that I was already half in love with you before I ever pulled you from that well." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, full of promise and possibility. Their second was deeper, more certain, as if they were sealing a pact with the desert itself to build something beautiful and lasting in this harsh, unforgiving place. The days that followed took on a rhythm as natural as breathing. Daniel taught Elena how to find water in the desert, how to identify edible plants, how to read the sky for weather signs. Elena taught Daniel to write more fluently in Spanish, sharing the stories her mother had told her, helping him document his grandmother's teachings so they wouldn't be lost. In the evenings they would sit by the cave entrance and watch the sunset paint the rocks in shades of gold and crimson. Daniel would point out constellations and tell her their stories in 2 languages, the names his grandmother had taught him and the ones he'd learned from astronomy books. Elena would read aloud from the small collection of books he kept in the cave, her voice carrying the words out into the desert night. They were happy, against all odds, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but each other, and the vast indifferent wilderness. They were deeply, completely happy. It couldn't last. 3 weeks after her rescue, Elena woke to the sound of horses approaching fast. Daniel was already awake, already reaching for the rifle he kept near his bedroll. "Stay here," he said quietly. But Elena was already moving, crawling to the cave entrance where she could see out without being seen. There were 6 riders, and she recognized the lead horse immediately, Don Alejandro's black stallion. The older man sat straight in his saddle despite his age, his silver hair gleaming in the morning sun. Behind him rode his foreman and 4 of his best men, all armed. "Daniel Crowfeather," Don Alejandro's voice rang out across the desert. "I know you're here. I've come to discuss terms." Elena felt her blood freeze. Daniel squeezed her shoulder reassuringly, then stepped out of the cave with his hands visible but his rifle still within reach. "Don Alejandro," he said calmly, "you're a long way from your comfortable ranch." The older man's eyes were cold as January rain. "Not so far that I can't reach those who steal from me. I've stolen nothing from you. You've stolen my property." Don Alejandro's gaze flicked toward the cave entrance. "Elena Morales is an indentured servant. She owes me 3 more years of service to pay off her mother's medical debts." Elena's heart sank. She had forgotten about the debt. Her mother's final illness had been expensive, and Elena had signed papers agreeing to work without wages until it was settled. In her joy at being free, at finding love, she had pushed the legal reality to the back of her mind. "She owes you nothing," Daniel said evenly. "She was falsely accused and nearly murdered for a crime she didn't commit." Don Alejandro smiled thinly. "I have 6 witnesses who say otherwise, including my daughter who swears she saw Elena take the locket." "Your daughter lied. Prove it." Daniel's hand moved slowly to his shirt, withdrawing the silver locket. Even at a distance it caught the light like captured fire. "She dropped this by the creek. I saw her planted in Elena's room." For a moment Don Alejandro's composure cracked. Elena saw surprise, then calculation, flicker across his features. "Even if that were true," he said finally, "Elena signed a legal contract. She belongs to me until her debt is paid." "No one belongs to anyone," Daniel said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. Don Alejandro's men shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to their weapons. "I'm prepared to be reasonable," the older man said. "Elena returns with me now, and I'll reduce her remaining service to 2 years. She'll be treated well, given better quarters, but she comes back. And if she refuses?" Don Alejandro's smile was like winter. "Then I report to the territorial marshal that a half-breed outlaw is harboring stolen property and kidnapped women. How do you think that will end for you, Crowfeather?" Elena felt the world tilt beneath her. She knew exactly how it would end. Daniel would be hunted, imprisoned, or killed. Her debt would pass to him, growing larger with each day of harboring stolen property. There would be no happy ending, no life together in their desert paradise. She stepped out of the cave. "Elena, no," Daniel said sharply. But she was already walking toward the horses, her chin held high. "I'll come back willingly," she said to Don Alejandro. "But I want the locket returned to Maria, and I want Daniel left alone. He's done nothing wrong." Don Alejandro nodded graciously, as if he hadn't just threatened murder. "Of course, I'm a reasonable man." Elena turned back to Daniel, memorizing his face in the harsh morning light. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." His dark eyes were fierce with pain and helpless rage. "This isn't over." "Yes," she said gently, "it is." One of Don Alejandro's men helped her onto a spare horse. As they rode away, Elena didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see Daniel standing alone among the red rocks, couldn't bear to watch their happiness disappear into the desert heat like a mirage. The return to the hacienda was a blur of dust and regret. Elena was given new quarters, better ones as promised, and assigned to lighter duties. Don Alejandro was true to his word about treating her well, but she felt like a ghost moving through her days. The other servants whispered about her mysterious disappearance and return, but she ignored them all. At night she would stand at her small window and look out toward the desert, wondering if Daniel was watching the same stars, thinking of her as she thought of him. Months passed. Elena's 21st birthday came and went unmarked. She taught some of the younger servants to read during their brief free time, finding small comfort in their eager faces. But mostly she simply endured, counting down the days until her debt would be paid, and she could leave this place forever. She was in the kitchen garden, harvesting vegetables for the evening meal, when she heard the commotion from the main house. Raised voices, the sound of horses, boots on the wooden veranda. Elena continued working, having learned that curiosity about the patron's business was rarely rewarded. But then Maria came running toward the garden, her 8-year-old face flushed with excitement. "Elena, Elena, come quickly. Papa wants to see you." Elena's heart began to race. Had she done something wrong? Had Don Alejandro decided to extend her contract somehow? She found him in his study, standing behind his massive oak desk with a document in his hands. His expression was unreadable. "Elena," he said formally, "your contract has been purchased." The words didn't make sense. "I'm sorry, senor. Your debt, all of it, including interest and penalties, has been paid in full by a third party. You're free to go." Elena felt the room spin around her. "I don't understand." "Who would?" Don Alejandro handed her the document. Her name was there, and the amount of her debt staggering even after all her months of work, and at the bottom, a signature in careful script, "Daniel Crowfeather." "How?" she whispered. Don Alejandro's smile was grudging but genuine. "It seems your half-breed friend found something valuable in those rocks of his. Silver ore, high grade. He's filed a legal claim, and sold the mining rights to a company out of Tucson. Quite a fortune, actually." Elena stared at the paper in disbelief. Daniel had bought her freedom, had given up his peaceful cave, his sanctuary, had probably sold his soul to mining companies and government bureaucrats, all to set her free. "There's more," Don Alejandro said quietly. "He's waiting for you. Outside." Elena's heart stopped, then began beating so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She ran from the study, through the house, past startled servants and family members, out onto the front veranda. Daniel stood beside his paint mare, looking up at the house with those patient dark eyes. He was dressed more formally than she'd ever seen him. Clean clothes, new boots, his hair neatly braided, but the warrior tattoo on his neck was the same, and his smile when he saw her was like coming home. Elena flew down the steps and into his arms, not caring who was watching, not caring about propriety or appearances, or anything except the solid reality of him holding her close. "You came back," she whispered against his chest. "I told you it wasn't over," he murmured into her hair. She pulled back to look at his face, needing to be sure this wasn't a dream. "Your cave, your sanctuary, you gave it all up for me." Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "Elena, you are my sanctuary. You're my home. Everything else is just geography. But the silver will buy us a new life wherever we want to build it. There's enough to start that school you dreamed about, to buy land, to have a real future together." His voice grew soft, uncertain. "If that's what you want." Elena's answer was another kiss, deeper and more passionate than any they'd shared before, a kiss that tasted like freedom and possibility, and the wild, endless promise of the desert sky. When they finally broke apart, Don Alejandro had appeared on the veranda, watching them with an expression that might have been approval. "Señorita Morales," he called down. "You're free to go, of course, but if you ever need work, you'll find a place here. You're a good teacher. Maria's reading has improved remarkably." Elena looked up at the little girl peering through the window, the child whose lie had started this whole journey. Instead of anger, she felt only gratitude. Without Maria's impulsive act, she never would have fallen into that well, never would have been saved by the man who became her salvation in more ways than one. "Thank you, Don Alejandro," she called back, "for everything." As Daniel helped her onto his horse, Elena caught sight of herself in the window glass. Sun-darkened skin, wind-tangled hair, eyes bright with tears and laughter. She looked wild, free, nothing like the frightened servant girl who had been thrown into a well 4 months ago. They rode out of the hacienda's gates as the sun began to set, painting the desert in familiar shades of gold and crimson. But this time, Elena wasn't running from something. She was running toward everything she had ever wanted. "Where to?" Daniel asked as they reached the crossroads that led in 4 different directions. Elena considered the question, looking out at the vast landscape that had once seemed so frightening and now felt like infinite possibility. "Somewhere we can build something beautiful," she said. "Somewhere children can learn and grow. Somewhere 2 people from different worlds can make a new world together." Daniel's arms tightened around her waist. "I know just the place." As they rode into the desert night, Elena thought about her mother's favorite saying, "Mija, love is not about finding someone to complete you. Love is about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself." She had fallen into a well as Elena Morales, indentured servant, victim of circumstance and cruel fate. She was riding out of the desert as Elena Morales, free woman, beloved and loving, ready to build a life that honored both her heritage and her dreams. The desert stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, telling stories of love and loss, of journeys ending and beginning, of the truth that had taken her so long to understand. Love doesn't ask permission from the world. It doesn't wait for convenient timing or favorable circumstances. It simply is, powerful as flash floods and gentle as morning light, transforming everything it touches. Behind them, the lights of the hacienda faded into memory. Ahead, the vast darkness of the desert held all the mystery and promise of tomorrow. And between Elena and Daniel, in the space where their hearts beat in rhythm with the horse's steady gait, love wrote its own story, one that would echo through generations like the ancient pictographs on canyon walls, a testament to the truth that some bonds transcend every boundary the world tries to build. In the end, love is the only frontier that matters. Everything else is just geography.